Welcome to Live Without Limits. Unlock your potential ultimate blueprint to transform your mindset. I'm your host, Davida Shinsky, and I'm glad that you're here. Today, we're diving into a fascinating, deeply personal topic: how our childhood experience and personality traits shape who we become as adults. Now, I'm going to give you a quick description before we actually get into it. Our adult identity doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's a complex blend of our early experiences and inherent personality traits. So we'll explore how the dynamics of our childhood, from relationships to environment, interact with our core temperament to influence our beliefs, behaviors, and life choices. You know, I once worked with someone who was incredibly driven, and underneath all of that, you would not believe that there was a childhood marked by instability. Their need for control and perfection wasn't just ambition, it was survival. And it made me realize we're all carrying pieces of our past when we don't realize it. So we'll explore how the environments we grow up in, from nurturing to chaotic, interact with our unique personalities to shape the way we think, feel, and relate to the world. We'll look at how patterns form, why certain challenges seem to repeat, and how awareness of these roots can empower us to make intentional changes. So whether you're on a journey of self-discovery, personal growth, or just curious about the why behind who we are, this episode is for you. Let's get started. The foundation of childhood. Let's begin with the foundation. Early childhood. This stage of life, those first few years, is more than just a blur of toys, naps, and playgrounds. It's where the core of who we are begins to take shape. From birth to around age 7, our brains are in rapid development mode. We're absorbing the world like sponges, not just learning languages and motor skills, but learning how to feel safe, how to relate to others, and how to interact with the world around us. Formative experiences during this time leave deep imprints. A child who consistently receives love, attention, and encouragement from caregivers tends to grow up with a stronger sense of self-worth and emotional security. On the other hand, if a child experiences neglect, harsh criticism, or emotional inconsistency, they may grow up questioning their value or struggling to trust others. Even subtle messages like being rewarded only for achievements or constantly being compared to siblings can shape how we see ourselves and how we believe we have to earn love. Attachment plays a human role here. When caregivers are emotionally available, children develop secure attachments which support healthy, emotional regulation, and resilience. But if attachments is disrupted through absence, trauma, or unpredictable behavior, it can lead to anxiety, people pleasing, or emotional withdrawal later in life. And I just want to kind of stop here a minute and say this because it bears an important aspect that my grandparents on both sides came from Europe and they experienced harsh realities. And then they brought those experiences to their home. And if you come from a toxic family, especially when two people who connect with each other and get married both come from toxic families, what are they doing? They're creating another toxic family because what are they doing? They're bringing and treating their children the way they were treated because they don't know any difference. Therefore, we have to realize that the home we come from determines who we are as adults ourselves. So let's say this again. Attachment plays a human role here. When caregivers are emotionally available, children develop secure attachments, which support healthy emotional regulation and resilience. But if attachment is disrupted through absence, trauma, or unpredictable behavior, it can lead to anxiety, people pleasing, or emotional withdrawal in life. The environment we grow up in also teaches us what to expect from the world. Was it safe or chaotic? Encouraging or critical? Inclusive or isolating? Those early messages help form our worldview, our beliefs about others, about success, and about what's possible for us. Now, I grew up in a home that was very toxic because both families, both sides, came from toxic families themselves. But the added thing is that they had two children with disabilities, and then the third one had no physical obvious disability, although she had internal ones. And my mother was always constantly comparing herself to the people around her, finding herself unworthy. And that's what she taught my younger sister. They became very jealous of what other people had in their pockets, the way they dressed, the just the home they lived in, everything. And because it was an era when society didn't even accept its or acknowledge its disability community, those were the way me and my older sister were treated by our parents. And because my personality is to be very outgoing, to talk to people, to be able to interact easily with strangers. And my other sister was very much of an introvert and deaf and found it very difficult to communicate. She ended up being very isolated and very alone and very dependent on my mother. And then when my mother died, she has no idea how to take care of herself, how to even use the TTY to make appointments for herself, anything. She will just go to bed and sleep all day if there's no one around to make her get up, get dressed, go out and do something. Whereas I'm the type of person that cannot sit still, have to move, have to interact with people. And I think that that's why it's easier for me to to do the things that I do. So, awareness is the first step toward healing. Next, we'll explore how our core personality traits interact with these early experiences to shape how we each respond to life in our own unique way. Now, there's various different types of behavioral assessments that help you understand where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, and how that by being with someone who is totally the opposite helps you and brings a strength within that relationship. But personality is nature's blueprint. Now that we've talked about the environment we're raised in, let's look at something just as important: who we are at our core, our personality. Personality is the unique mix of traits, tendencies, and patterns that shape how we think, feel, and behave. Some of it is influenced by genetics, where we're born with certain temperaments. Others develop over time through life experience and the environment that we live in. Some kids are naturally more introverted. They process things internally and need quiet space to recharge. Others are more extroverted. They thrive on social interaction and external stimulation. Neither is better. They're just different expressions of how we engage with the world. Then there's sensitivity. Some children are highly sensitive to changes in tone, tension, or emotion in a room. Others are more resilient or adaptable in the face of stress. These traits shape not just how we experience our surroundings, but also how deeply we feel them. Temperament about also affects these, like adaptability, persistence, and mood. One child might be easygoing and flexible, while another needs predictability and reacts more strongly to change or frustration. This is why two siblings can grow up in the same household and come out of it with different stories and very different perspectives. It's not just the environment that matters, it's how their personality filters that experience. A nurturing environment may help a shy child feel safe enough to open up, but in a critical or chaotic home, that same child might retreat further into themselves and develop anxiety. Meanwhile, a more outgoing sibling might act out, seeking attention or control. Understanding personality helps us see that our childhood experiences weren't one size fits all. Our traits influenced how we interpreted what happened and how we learned to adapt, survive, or protect ourselves. Now, we're going to explore how These early experiences and personality traits come together to shape who we are as adults and what we do if we want to grow beyond the patterns they created. How experience meets personality. So now that we understand the basics of personality and environment, let's talk about how they work together because the same experience doesn't affect everyone the same way. It Personality acts like a filter. Take two children in the same household. Let's say the home environment is critical or perfection driven. A highly sensitive child might internalize every harsh word, constantly seeking approval to avoid disapproval. Over time, they may become perfectionists, driven not by passion, but by fear of making mistakes. That same environment with a child who's more emotionally resilient might have a very different outcome. They might learn to tune out the criticism and focus on fixing things to restore peace. That child could grow into a problem solver, someone who takes charge and adapts quickly under pressure. Or think about the chaotic home where routines don't exist, emotions run high, and security feels unstable. A sensitive or an anxious child might develop hypervigilance and struggle with trust. Meanwhile, a more independent or adventurous child might learn to thrive in unpredictability and develop a strong sense of self resilience. This shows us that it's our personality traits that shape the meaning we assign to events. They influence what we remember, what we suppress, how we cope, and ultimately who we become. Some of us become caretakers early because we sense the emotional needs of others. Some become high achievers to earn love. Some become avoiders to stay safe. And these adaptations, they make sense back then, but they don't always serve us in adulthood. The good news is that once we understand how our personality shaped our story, we can begin to rewrite it with awareness, compassion, and intention, becoming the adult that you are today. Maybe you find yourself in a relationship where you constantly try to earn love because as a child, love felt conditional. Or maybe you feel unworthy of praise at work because early on you were only noticed when you excelled. These patterns often play out in our careers, our confidence, and even the way we talk to ourselves when no one else is around. Sometimes we live with the inner critic that sounds a lot like someone from our past. Or we repeat the same relationship dynamics because they feel familiar, even when they're unhealthy. This first step towards change is awareness, recognizing your triggers, noticing your habits, and questioning the stories you tell yourself, like, I have to do it all, or I'm not enough unless I'm achieving. Once you're aware, you can start to heal. That might look like reparenting yourself, giving yourself the love, validation, or boundaries that you didn't receive growing up. It might mean going to therapy to unpack old wounds, or using mindfulness practices to respond rather than react. Early on, when I was in college and I was studying psychology, I was in a transactional analysis group as much for training, but it helped me realize the dynamics of what was going on in my family. And because in mental health, I studied about assessment profiles, that once I started working with the DISC and using that as a product or service and go into the corporations to do train the trainer sessions, it also worked on dealing with personalities, how they influence who you are, how the home you were raised in influences who you are, how all the things work together. So let's start back here. Personal development isn't about fixing yourself, it's about finding yourself beneath the layers that you built for survival. You're not broken, you're becoming. And the more you understand your story, the more power you have to rewrite it. Not as a child who adapted to survive, but as an adult who's ready to thrive. So, as we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with this truth. Your past informs you, but it doesn't have to define you. And there's a saying that I keep on my computer that comes from Carl Jung that says, it's not what happened to me in the past, but it's what I choose to become. Yes, your childhood shaped parts of your personality. It influenced how you love, work, respond to stress, and see yourself. But you are not stuck in that story. You can honor where you came from and choose a new direction. So let me ask you, what childhood pattern are you ready to release? Is it the need to please, the fear of being too much, or not enough, the habit of shrinking yourself to feel safe? Whatever it is, simply naming it is a powerful first step. I encourage you to sit with this question, journal about it, talk it out with a therapist or a coach. Your story deserves to be seen, heard, and healed, not buried. And remember, growth doesn't always look like loud transformation. Sometimes it's quiet awareness. Sometimes it's saying, I choose differently today, and that's enough. So if this show resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who needs this message. And don't forget to join me next time where we'll explore how self-compassion becomes the bridge between where you've been and where you're going. So until then, be kind to yourself. You're not starting over, you're starting fresh, and this time with clarity. And there's some other things that I want to talk to you about because I think this is just so important that, and let me give you my experiences. When I was educated, you did not have the Individual Disability Education Act like you have today. That was not passed until I was actually in graduate school. And I'm very lucky in a way that I was raised in the Jewish religion because education is very much a part of the religion because it's how they passed on the teachings to the next generation. And that's why you saw more people who would, in the Jewish faith, who became doctors, who became lawyers, who became the business owners, who became, well, they were a lot more ambitious than what you saw. And then when you look at personality and how someone's personality can put them in a position to be driven, well, then that's where other things came into place. But also, not only that you didn't have the Individual Disability Education Act, that even though you had the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which talked about accessibility and talked about adapting to the environment, you really did not see where there was a push to enforce those laws. And therefore, many people with disabilities, until these laws came to effect, struggled to get ahead in society. And even the laws, when it came to getting services, had to change. And today there's agencies that are basically out there to support the disability community and enforce the laws that are there and to push the government to comply with these laws. So who you are today also depends on the environment you come from. And this is something that I've actually talked about many, many times because so many people don't understand about the importance of an education day, especially for someone with a disability. And when I entered the workforce, you did not have the Rehabilitation Act or the Americans with Disabilities Act. Therefore, what happened was that many people who were actually getting an education couldn't find gainful employment. And when they couldn't find gainful employment, like in my case, I would have liked to have had the opportunity to work somewhere, built up a savings before I actually started my own business. And it was natural for me with my personality to want to be in business for myself, to think like an entrepreneur, which is something that not everyone can do, but you can learn to become educated, to open a business. And whereas when I started my business, you needed a lot of money and a lot of overhead because it was going out and advertising, putting together the media kit, getting it mailed out. Today, if you have a website, you can put all that information on your website. You can put videos on your website. You can almost use that website to promote yourself without a lot of overhead. And this is what I'm getting at, is that when you look at your personality and you look at the environment, all those things come together to determine whether you're someone that's a go-getter, or whether you have to be pushed or encouraged, or whether or not you're so insecure that you're not even going to try. And that's why when you're that insecure with the way the workplace, and I can tell you this much, I had a cousin that had a background in business administration, but he started out working for a company where he would travel around and go to clients whose books they kept. And that was very stressful for him. But you put him in a place where he's working in a bank, where he's the mediator for the stocks and how he does very, very well, because he doesn't have to be the one making those decisions. Someone else is, but he's doing the actual work. So understanding how all those things play together also determine whether or not you are someone who can become an entrepreneur, or you need to learn to have an mindset of an entrepreneur, or whether you're constantly going to be the one who works for someone else and let them handle all the stress.